back to the Braw Tech Podcast. My name is Amy Kelly, and I'm really excited to have Euan Cameron, co-founder of Willo, here with me today. How are you doing, Euan?
Thank you. I'm good. Thanks for having me on. This is exciting.
Yeah, really happy to have you. Thank you for everyone tuning in. So just to kick off, Euan, could you just introduce yourself, tell us a little bit more about your background?
Sure, yeah. So today I'm the CEO and co-founder of Willo. Willo is a video interviewing platform founded 4 years ago in Scotland, and we've been growing quite steadily over the past few years, raised a bunch of VC cash as well to help us grow even faster. And before that, my background is in digital marketing. Spent the first 15 years of my career in digital marketing, both in-house, and then I started my own agency, and actually went to university with Amy, where we both studied business at Glasgow University as well.
Yeah, we go way back. So This is really amazing to have you here. So thank you so much for taking the time. Can we talk a little bit more about Willo, Euan? You know, what is the problem that you're solving? Why did you decide to start it?
Yeah. So Willo, for anyone that doesn't know, is essentially a platform that allows employers to upload a number of questions that they want to ask candidates. So they can type in the questions they want to ask. They then send the candidates the questions, and the candidates record their answers on video or audio, and they're then sent back to the employer. So the employer basically sends them a link, and then the candidate responds, and then they get a link back. Super simple when you think about it like that. But the sort of the reason behind it and the purpose of why we do what we do is when I was 10 years ago hiring for a startup organization. I'm hiring for the startup, and I'm sifting through CVs, like literally a stack of CVs on the table every morning. And I'm printing them all out as well, because that's when you printed stuff out, even though it was on the computer. So I would come in, I'd have a big print out of CVs, and I'd be going through all the CVs, and I would be highlighting bits. I was like, I don't even know what I'm highlighting. I'm just going through and highlighting all these bits and pieces. I would then invite people in for an interview, and they were nothing like the bits that I highlighted. And sometimes they wouldn't even show up, which was even worse. Or sometimes they would be completely different from what they wrote on their CV. And it just felt like such a broken process. I'm spending hours going through these CVs. They're coming in, or they're not even showing up. No one's having a great experience here. It just seemed really dumb. So I got bored of that. I was really frustrated. So I started just asking candidates for a video. So I basically said, thanks, Amy, for your application. That's great. Can you just record a 3-minute video, send it in to me, tell me why you want to work here? And that was it. It was super easy. I basically said that. This is 2015, so this is before selfies. This was before smartphones had front-facing cameras and stuff. So it was a big ask. I was asking them to do something that was actually quite challenging for some people to do, technically quite challenging. But the cool thing was people did it. So I started getting videos in. I'm basically sitting at my desk and I'm getting emails, and people are sending in videos. They're hosted on YouTube, or they've attached a video to the email, or they're hosted on another video platform like Vimeo or something. And I was watching these videos back, and I'm like, holy shit, these videos are actually real people. I want to work with some of these people. And then I could, get them in for an interview, or sometimes even just offer them. I'd be like, the video looks perfect. You sound like you really want to work here. Gonna be a good fit. When can you start? And that was really that was the early, I guess, MVP, but it wasn't really an MVP because I wasn't trying to make a business. It was just an idea that I wanted to have for myself. And then it just, over the years, evolved into, how do we make this concept of asking candidates for videos into something that's actually scalable and robust and sellable? And eventually that's where we got to Willo.
That's amazing. It creates such a more of a human experience. You're not hiring the resume anymore. Yeah. You're hiring the real person.
Yeah, it was a real shortcut from this application, which has got nothing in it. Literally the application would be name, email address, phone number, to having a video, which is the person. Mm-hmm. And I was like, this is awesome. I managed to cut out that stupid step in the middle, which I wasn't even using. And it was cool to see, because I had no intentions of obviously making a business. I was just trying to make something a little bit better for me and these candidates.
And it just you can have that more of that connection to really understand who someone is. Yeah. I actually remember creating a video for YouTube to send to YouTube to get a job at YouTube. Yeah. And actually they said the reason I got it was because I sent that video, because they could see what you looked like. This was 8-9 years ago. I can't even remember now. But I think that is amazing. You've been able to build this and scale this into something so that people can see who's coming through. And it's not just a sheet of paper, and it's not just a list of experience. Yeah. You're really getting to see them really. And then how you're talking about how seamless, that sounded really easy, how the product works. Is that as simple as it is, in terms of how to use it?
Yeah, I mean, from a user perspective, it's pretty simple. The employer is going to sign up for an account, it takes like 3 minutes to set up. So you're going to add your own branding. You're going to add all your colleagues, your hiring managers. You're then going to create a job, and you're going to create a series of questions. We have questions built in as well, so you don't even need to have your own questions. We'll just populate with a bunch of questions which we know are popular and well responded to. And then you choose whether you want video, whether you want audio, or whether you want text. So you can actually decide how the candidate responds, which makes it a little bit more flexible. Because we're fortunate enough to have customers in over 150 countries. Countries obviously have different cultural and social norms. So some countries, video is not as accepted. In other countries, it's maybe text or maybe it's audio. And sometimes jobs as well lend themselves better to different mediums. And then sometimes the actual employers themselves, the company maybe just wants videos, for example, or just wants text. So we allow them to choose that, and then they just literally will invite candidates by email address. So you put the email address in, click send. We take care of the invites. We do SMS, email address, WhatsApp, and then the candidate responds in their own time. So they can do it whenever they want, which is quite cool. So like a huge, and we're talking like tens of thousands of candidates will interview after 5 p.m. every day, which when you think about traditional hiring world, nobody's interviewing past 5 p.m. You might stay in the office till 6 p.m., but that's it. Whereas a lot of candidates actually want to interview 9, 10 p.m. at night because they finished the day job, maybe their kids are asleep, they've got some time where they can actually dedicate to doing an interview and doing it properly. So that whole evening hiring is just amazing for candidates because it means that they can actually put their best foot forward.
Yeah.
And it's the same the other side of the day as well. We see a lot of 6 a.m., 7 a.m. interviews as well, which again, you just would never see in traditional interviews because people wouldn't have the flexibility to do it. So it's opened up a whole, opportunity for candidates at either end of the day.
A lot less fake dentist appointments then.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that really, you maybe can relate from previous jobs. It really, she was quite painful to say like a lie to your boss. Hey, I'm going to just be a doctor's appointment for the next 3 hours. Like for, most honest people, that's really difficult to do. Yeah. But it's the way that the traditional hiring process makes you behave, which is stupid. It makes no sense.
Yeah, it doesn't feel fair at the time. It was like that back in our day when we were obviously, before we had Willo.
Yeah, exactly.
So you have got a co-founder, Andrew.
Yes.
Could you tell us a little bit more about how you both first connected and then decided to embark on this journey together? Yeah.
Yes, this is a great point. This kind of, I speak to people often about co-founders and whether you should have a co-founder. And if you have a co-founder, what's the point? How does it all work? What's the relationship like? And you also hear other stories about co-founder relationships falling apart and stuff. Like, it's an interesting topic. The story for me was I basically had this idea that I told you about, and I'm developing it on holidays and stuff, and like on weekends, just playing about with this idea. And then a couple of years go by, like literally years go by, and Woody is a friend of mine through his wife I went to university with, and I'm interested in this idea and taking it further, and I explain it to Woody. And really at that point, I was just looking for feedback. I was just sharing the idea with everyone that I could meet, and I was like sort of spitballing ideas and stuff. But I knew that Woody was in the space. When I told him about the idea, though, he was really interested. His eyes lit up. And I was like, okay, maybe this is a person that I can actually get to hold me accountable. At that point, I was just literally like, maybe I should commit that I'm going to make this happen. And this is the person that will hold me accountable. So we ended up with a meeting. We had a meeting in Glasgow. I pitched it. And Woody was like, yeah, I'm on board. And at that point, I was like, okay, cool. Now we actually have to do something. So we then formed a company. We came up with a name. We came up with a logo. We, instructed a development agency to build the MVP. And everything just started to snowball really quickly. And I think a lot of that in the early days was actually not so much that we were working together or that we had complementary skills, but just that we were two people holding each other accountable for making something happen. It's much easier than trying to do it on your own. Mm-hmm. And you also feel like if you say something to them, if you don't do it, you've kind of let yourself down as well. So it was a really great little motivator in the early days because we were both working full time as well. So we could sort of say something like, oh, I'm going to do this at the weekend. And you did it at the weekend because you felt like, I don't want to let that person down. So it was great for early progress. And then obviously as time went on, we started to establish, we became a real trading business. We raised some money and things. And then fast forward to today, and we've got really clearly defined roles. Like Woody's really focused on sales and the customer relationship. And then I'm really focused on operations and marketing. And we've really just split it that way since day one. And that's just progressed ever since. So it's been a good relationship, good journey to have.
It's great that you're just spitballing ideas all those years ago. Being so open about it. Because obviously, a lot of people get scared if, you end up telling everyone, but to then inspire him to get involved is fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, this is actually, people often speak about like, oh yeah, when you have a business idea, you should not keep it to yourself. That's really hard. Like I often felt like people were going to steal it. Yeah. Which is so funny when you look back, because no one was going to steal it. I mean,
I would have definitely stolen
it. I barely could build it myself. No one else is building it, and they could just get like a thread of an idea. I'm like, I'd really like spent years before planning. So I was like, no one's going to steal it, but I felt like they did. So I'm also like, it would be like nights out and stuff in the pub after a few beers, just like chatting random stuff, random shit. And that's normally where I'd tell people, including Woody. And
so you've been growing really fantastic after just hearing, obviously, from that amount of countries that you're already trading in. So how have you set up the company right now in terms of chosen to build the team to get it ready to support growth?
Yeah, good question. So I guess my kind of previous experience has made us build it this way. So it's not really, I can't necessarily take credit for the way that we've built it. My previous experience was always like build and then hire, and grow and then hire. So don't hire for growth, grow first and then hire. So that's how we've done it at Willo. We've always pushed for more growth, be bigger than we actually are. And then once you've like created the problems, like for example, too many customers and not enough people to support them, or too many feature requests and not enough engineers to build the features, then hire the people. And that's been really successful for us, because it means that you can grow quite sustainably and quite frugally. So we're quite frugal with our funds. We always have been. And it's one of the comments that a lot of investors say is that, and I actually think they don't believe our story until they see the accounts, just how little we've spent to get to where we've got to today, which is really nice to see. We've always just done everything so sort of frugally, like we're literally doing it ourselves, or we're sort of stretching our roles to make sure that we can cover all the bases, or we're hiring contractors and freelancers for like really tightly defined little projects. And that's just allowed us to be really, really frugal and grow way beyond our actual team size, which is quite fun. When people ask how big our team is, it should really be probably in their minds 3 times what the answer is, which is quite a cool thing to be able to do, particularly in 2024 when you look at the funding landscape and investors kind of pulling back and saying, we want you to be profitable, we want you to have sustainable growth. We thankfully built it like that since 2020, so it's kind of met the expectations that are now in the market.
Because how many have you got working?
So 12 full-time.
12 full-time.
Yeah.
That's brilliant. Fantastic. And we would love to dial into the founder experience on the Braw Tech Podcast. So if you could just share a little bit about what's that been like for you, warts and all, like, because being a founder is by no means easy. So we'd love to just find out more about your experience.
Sure. So this is my 3rd founding company, but the first one that's been investor backed. So in a lot of people's minds, that's like the first real true founder journey, because you've got the external pressures of investment. But the first 2 companies I would say were kind of key to me understanding how it's going to go the 3rd time. Like the first time was a car finance company. I'm like sitting there day one, it's just me, 2 salespeople. That's it. I was like, what the fuck did we do? And that was like 2014. I'm like quite early on in my career, and that was a great eye opener for me. I was like, because it's difficult, like when you go to a job, you're doing these things, and then there's an outcome, whereas there was no definition of what I was supposed to do. And if I could just like literally sit in my chair and spin around in the chair if I wanted, because there was no job description. And that's like literally the way that I felt for the first few weeks. I was like, no one's telling me what to do here. How do I know what to do? And then eventually I realized that you actually have to come up with your own things. And like, otherwise it won't move forward. So that was really cool. Like that first experience, it was 2 years. We grew the company from 3 employees to 35 employees. We were financing 1 car in the first month. And then we managed to, it was a car finance company. And then we were financing about 500 cars a month by the end of it. And it was really cool to be able to see that transition, that growth and that scale, and actually what was possible just with hard work and people. So I would go in like 8 a.m. every day. I would leave at like 8 p.m. It was horrible in the winter months, obviously, but it was great just to see how you could actually do something just by putting like your mind to it and actually doing it. So that was cool. Then I built my own agency, and that was really a stopgap before Willo to both do what I wanted to do. So I really liked working with startups, similar to what you're doing today. I really loved that. Like I love working with startups because they're all like, a lot of them really struggle with marketing, but they're also like different and at different stages. So I built up a small portfolio of like 15 clients. It was super fun because they were all at different stages, and they had nobody in marketing. So I was like the marketing department. It was really cool. And that was great because that, again, similar to the first experience, was all about like, no one else is going to do it. You have to do it. Like you have to wake up in the morning and actually press those buttons, because if you don't, nothing will happen. And it was cool to see. And then obviously you get to press the button to send invoices. People pay the invoices. That was really cool too, because then you're like, my actual like time equals money. And it was cool to see that, because I didn't really have any concept of that until that point. So that was really good, eye-opening experience. And then finally, when we get to Willo, again, it was a real learning curve because I'd never raised any money before. And it was a massive eye-opener for me in terms of, I guess, like the pressure that it adds. So previously, the two organizations before that didn't have investors. So like I said, if I spun around my chair all week, okay, cool, you're not going to make any money, but no one's going to get annoyed at that. Whereas in Willo, when you have investors, you can't do that because people are expecting something back. Like they're giving you money for something to actually come back to them in a few years' time. So that was a really interesting change, I suppose, in the Willo journey. The Willo journey also had this learning that software is obviously infinitely scalable. So, where the agency is not, because you have to have a one-to-one relationship, or the car finance company is not, because you actually have to deal with each customer one by one, and every case is different. With software, like literally, if the product's good enough, you can put it out there. As many people as physically possible can use it, and I found that really fascinating as well. And that's obviously why we pushed really hard into all these different markets, because I was curious to see how far we could push it. And we have, like I said, 150 countries is where our customers are. So literally customers are paying us from 150 countries. But the candidates are actually interviewing in all 195 countries. The last year and the previous year, we had an interview completed in every country in the world, which is really cool. But that just goes to show you that software it can literally reach every corner of the world. And you don't need to be in every corner of the world to do it, which I just find really cool. Like we're based in Scotland, in Glasgow, in a tiny city, which most people have never even heard of outside of the UK. But yeah, you can sort of transact and sell and be in those countries. I find it really cool. So it's interesting, the evolutions, but like all of them have just been learnings and like hard work as well, just actually like physically getting out of bed every morning and doing the thing that you're supposed to do.
Yeah, you had to be your own boss and build your own guidelines to make all that impact. That's brilliant, Euan. And you mentioned in Scotland, obviously, here there is an ecosystem that's very connected, and everyone seems to know each other and everyone helps each other. So what's your experience like being navigating the Scottish tech ecosystem in terms of just like having support, and any tips that you've got for fellow founders of how to leverage it?
Yeah, so interesting. Hearing from experiences of other Scottish founders, because there's a real mixed bag of opinions about the support that the country gives and the government gives and that the local councils and things give. Our experience has been really positive, and I can actually say pretty confidently that Willo wouldn't exist without Scottish enterprise support, which I think is again quite different from a lot of the views that you might hear out there, but it's completely true for us. The first grant that we received from a Scottish enterprise was what actually funded our MVP. The MVP wouldn't exist without that. And it's really cool to be able to see that and say that. And then a number of other grants over the first 2 years, all from Scottish enterprise, all helped with the growth of Willo. And even in the fundraising space, having the backing and having because we were on like the sort of business fast track program or something, having that program and having that backing just added so much credibility for investors early on. They were like, you could literally like connect them with the Scottish enterprise advisors. You could show them all the grants that you've received and the accounts. All of that built up so much credibility. So I think there's a lot of negativity and there's a lot of conflicting views out there, but like I said, the success of Willo actually wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for Scottish Enterprise. I don't think we would have got that money elsewhere. It was 2019 that we got our first grant. It was a really big application. It took freaking ages to fill in. And it was complicated as hell, and you had to do a lot of things because they just didn't exist. We had to make policies and stuff, like employment policies, environmental policies. Those things didn't exist, obviously, because we basically had a name, and we had some drawings that I'd made. That was like it. But we built up a business because we had to, fulfill the grant application. And then we got the money, and then the money allowed us to do what we needed to do. So yeah, it was great from that perspective. And I can honestly say that we wouldn't be here without it. As time's gone on, naturally the support drops off. We don't really get any support anymore. But we have obviously a lot of external funders that, in the private sector that do fund us. So I wouldn't expect it. But I think the actual funding ecosystem, it does get a bad name. But I think if you're willing to actually work for the grants, put in a bunch of effort, and it's not easy, by the way, it's really difficult to fill in a lot of those grants because you have to fulfill the requirements. So you might look at it and be like, our project is this, and then the grant is actually for this. And then you have to change the scope of your project to meet the needs of the grant. But if you're getting the money, it's free money, who cares? Like, make it work. And that's what we did every time. The kind of projects would change, the scope would change. There was also this caveat that you have to always pay for the project first. You have to pay your freelancers and your contractors first, or buy the materials first, and then you claim the money back from Scottish Enterprise. Again, that's fine, just make it work. Get a credit card or something. It doesn't really matter how you pay for it, as long as you make it work. It's free money, and I wouldn't shun that at any point. The government's willing to give you might as well take it if you can and figure out how to make it work. When it comes to so that's like the public sector support, and I think it is great if you can navigate it, and you should be able to navigate it. It's not that complicated. It's just time and effort. The other piece I think is the investment and the angel network in Scotland, because that does get also a bad rep, and I think that is fairly, from the experience I've had, it's fairly true. There's not a huge number of angel investors in Scotland, and there's definitely not many venture capital organizations in Scotland. So it is challenging to get funding from those two sources, and I don't think that's going to change anytime soon, unfortunately. So yeah, public sector, great for funding, great for grants and support. We also there was one really cool one, which was, because this is actually really important in the story of Willo. Willo was called Weave originally. So 2019, it's called Weave, W-E-V-E. We thought that was a great name. Scottish Enterprise were like, we can fund this IP search, this global IP search for you if you want, with lawyers and stuff. I was like, okay, it's free, might as well, it might come in handy. Thankfully, we did do it because Weave turned out to be a company in France. It was a massive conglomerate. If we had gone down the route of Weave, we would have had to change it a couple of years later anyway, and it would cost a lot more. We had a massive headache. So Scottish Enterprise saved our asses there as well, because they told us straight up, you have to change the name. And then we did a name change, and then they actually searched and checked the new name as well. So Willo was checked. We then registered the IP for that as well, which was really cool. So Scottish Enterprise really saved our asses there, which was great. But yeah, the angel network and the VC network in Scotland isn't there, and that's not going to change anytime soon, unfortunately. So we have, I think, only taken money from two Scottish investors, and we have 22. So 2 out of 22 is not great odds for Scotland's funding, but all of our fundings come from England, Guernsey, and the US. And that's just because it doesn't exist here. There's no one really out there.
So that's a lot of investors to keep track of. So in terms of how you're approaching that from a relationship standpoint, we've talked about this before, just how you've managed it almost like a sales approach, So, what tips and tricks do you have for just managing that to get what you need from investment?
Yeah, so this is a question that I get asked quite a lot, because we've completed our 4th round, and I had a pretty when we speak to other founders, we had a pretty good experience of fundraising. All 4 rounds of they've lasted between 3 and 6 months, and they've either met the requirements or we've actually overfunded in the end, which is cool. But each of those rounds, my advice, and I've learned this just the hard way through doing it, my advice for anyone that's fundraising is just to treat it like a sales opportunity. Each of the investors you speak to is like a prospect. Each of those investors is buying a part of your company. So why not just treat them like prospects in a sales process? So we have like a CRM, which is just literally a fancy Google spreadsheet, and it has stages. So it has like, cold outreach, it has warm, it has pitching, it has committed, or it has not committed. And we just move each of the investors, whether it's an individual, whether it's a VC, we move each investor through the stages of the pipeline. And as they get warmer, we send them different emails. So I have like different email templates. They all receive it. We warm each of the prospects up, or each of the investors up. And then as they start to commit, you can then put in like the committed amount. You then start to get an idea of how much is committed. The pipeline starts to grow, just like a sales pipeline. You can then obviously warm those up as well. So you're like, hey, we've got this much committed. Are you joining? Start to build a bit of FOMO. All just sales stuff though. And then you get to the end of the journey. They hopefully transfer all their funds across. And then we move them into like an after sales process. So like, here's, the thanks. Here's the box of goodies or the gifts or the swag or whatever. Thanks for supporting us. And then we put them into a monthly newsletter forevermore. Because again, like a customer, they may refer another customer to you, or they might, spend more with you or invest more with you. So I just think it's really simple when you think about it, just like treat investment like a sales process. And if you can do sales, you can do investment. It's not rocket science. It's just about, like sales, speaking to a bunch of people at the very top, like everyone, hundreds of people. They'll then move through your process. The funnel will get smaller, and then you'll get to the bottom of the funnel and you'll have some committed investors, hopefully. And if that's not working, reassess the funnel and start again, just like you would in sales. It's really not that hard when you break it down into like a more simple process. There's not any tricks or anything. It's not like you have to be, jumping like and navigating really confusing like smoke and mirrors or anything. It's just people. And a lot of these investors as well, when you think about VCs in particular, they have to and they want to deploy money. Like that's their job, is to deploy money in good growing businesses, just like customers want to go and buy good quality products. They're out there, you just got to find them and then explain to them why they should invest in you or buy your stock or whatever.
That's brilliant just to have that method. And I think that's a really good tip for anyone that's managing investment and just trying to understand how to approach it. Mm-hmm. Approaching it like a sales cycle would be so much more powerful just so that you know where you stand, definitely.
Yeah.
And that's brilliant.
It also forces you, I think, to be more realistic as well about the commits in particular. Because in a sales process, if you think about it, if you're running a sales team, a good sales team is not going to commit a deal until it's locked on, until they've gone through like a bank qualification or something, they've got the decision maker, they've got the budget. It's exactly the same with investment. Like if somebody sort of says, I'll give you 50 grand, you wouldn't commit that in your sales pipeline. So why would you commit it in your investment pipeline? You just wouldn't. So I think it really forces you to think really how locked on is this investment commitment? And that's been really useful for us over the years, because you speak to a lot of investors that love to, just like customers, when you're in a sales process, love to like get really far along the process and you're like, yes, this person's going to buy my thing. And then they just disappear. And that's the same with investors, because there's lots of opportunities. They can invest in any company they want. Like they've got the entire world to invest in and loads of great companies out there. Why yours? And a lot of them will just disappear. So it does force you to be more realistic about the commits. And I find that when I speak to other folks in the investment process, like they get burned because it like they were putting all their eggs in this one basket of this investor that just happened to say off the cuff, we'll give you 500,000. It was never committed. It was like still in the warm stage of your pipeline. So it's a great discipline, I think, if you can turn it into a real sales process, because it forces you to ask the hard questions. Yeah,
1,000,000%. No, that's brilliant, Euan, honestly. And in terms of Willo and where you're at, and loads of exciting things, but what's next in store? What are you excited about right now?
Yeah, great question. So the Willo platform has, as I mentioned earlier in the conversation, it's grown over the past 4 years, a couple of 100% year on year, and that's actually delivered a lot of scale. So today, as in this year, we'll interview about 2.5 to 3 million candidates across the course of the year in all those countries that I mentioned before. And it's about 2,000 customers or something. It's a lot of customers, a lot of candidates. Now that we have that scale, a lot of things start to become possible. So, for for example, over the next few years, we're going to actually help turn those candidates into more credentialized candidates. So rather than just being faces on video with a name and email address and phone number, we're going to be working quite hard to actually turn those candidates into real verified people that you can make decisions on whether you want to hire straight off that profile. So rather than it just being like an Amy profile with your videos, it will have all your credentials at the top, like your degree and whether it's validated with university, you know, whether you have a driver's license and is in date, do you have a passport, do you have a visa to work in the country that you're applying to work in, and all those things will be verified with third parties. So we'll go away and gather all that information and bring that back and present that on one page. That's quite powerful from an employer perspective, because at the moment, although we're adding a lot of value to the hiring process, they still have to go away and check all those things somewhere else. And that's a bit shit when you think about the process. Like even if I think that this candidate is perfect because I saw them in Willo, if I go away and do like a lookup and I find that they don't have a visa to work in the UK, that changes the candidate completely, right? But you spend so much time and you've got quite invested in that candidate. So the idea is we're going to be pulling in all these external credential sources, and that will give us a really validated profile. And you'll be able to look at each candidate and make quite conscious, strong decisions on whether you want to progress or not. Having a full, like 360 degree view, we call it. So having a real 360 about this candidate, not just whether they can work with us today, but do they meet all the other more binary things that you just have to jump through. You know, we do talk about like hiring for personality and hiring for skill and things, but there is still naturally a lot of binary yes, no's that you have to satisfy. And sometimes those things are overlooked, or people don't want to think about those things, but they are unfortunately realities. Particularly the visas and the right to works and things that you have. So surfacing all of that's quite exciting. That'll come, and that's only just over time we've got enough scale that we can actually do that. And then the other piece is, and we're working on this at the moment, is our whole CV free certification. So we're going to be essentially customers that decide to ditch the CV. We are going to be certifying them as CV free employers. And those CV free employers will be able to put that on their careers website. They'll be able to go out into the market and say to candidates, hey, we don't need a CV from you. We're hiring based on you as an individual and your personality. So the CV free movement is something that we're starting over the next few months. And that'll be a separate company to Willo. It'll be a separate brand. And that'll sit over here, and that'll be something that employers will be able to be accredited to, which is quite exciting.
That's brilliant. Amazing developments going on there.
Yeah.
I honestly don't think I could even think of writing a CV again.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean,
I
so many
think that's
candidates
brilliant.
are the same. Like they're going on Google and they're searching for a CV template.
Yeah.
And then they're getting AI to fill in that CV. And that's just because the CV is not a thing anymore, but it's still a currency that employers often need.
Yeah. Yeah. Feels
before
very
they'll-
old school.
yeah, it's crazy.
You're completely modernizing that.
Yeah. So by
That's brilliant.
like recognizing those employers as well, we should help more employers move along
Yeah.
the journey is the idea.
Oh, nice one. So we always like to give a shout out in the Braw Tech Podcast to another founder or startup or company that you admire, but it's not allowed to be in Scotland. It
Yeah.
has to be in another country. So anyone that you want to give a shout out to today?
Yes. So I am going to give a shout out to Jordan Walker. And Jordan Walker started an organization called Backtrack. Backtrack is cool. It's an app that basically sits on your phone. And whenever you go to a conference and you have a stand, you will put your phone on this app. So you'll open up Backtrack, you'll hit record, and the Backtrack app will basically record all of the interactions and all the conversations that you have on your stand that day. Okay. So all those prospects that are coming over to your stand, all those sales conversations, it records all of it, and then it makes notes and transcribes it all, and then gives you back at the end of the day or at the end of the hour all the conversations that you had at that conference, what was discussed, any actions, any takeaways, who the person was. And then you can, so think about it the moment if you go to a conference, you're like scribbling down notes, you're trying to remember like, what did I say to that person? What did I commit to? And someone else is coming over and you're forgetting. So they basically have this app that records it all and then uses AI to actually transcribe, and then more AI intelligence to figure out what was discussed, what do we need to do to follow up. So it
God, I
just
could have
stops
really
leads.
used that years ago, just
Yeah.
on all the trade shows. That
Yeah,
would have been
absolutely,
so
yeah.
good.
It's a really cool idea, and it just stops when you think about it, like you and I as well, when I go to these conferences, so many people are coming over to you, it's impossible to keep track of them all. But when you think about it, that's literally like leads just falling off the table and going to the bin. And he's trying to capture all these leads and keep them all in play. It's cool, it's a simple concept, but they've nailed it and they're delivering it. And it's actually available for MVP, so people can sign up on the website. It's cool.
Nice one. Thank you so much. So 2 more questions, Euan. So first of all, what's your best advice for fellow founders that are trying to grow their business? So it can maybe more earlier stage than what you're at right now.
Yeah. Best advice, I think it probably goes back to what we spoke about with accountability. Finding, definitely one of the kind of key things for me was finding people that would hold me accountable. So I was like literally committing to doing things. They would then, even if they didn't actually speak to me again about it, I felt accountable to them. So in the early days, we obviously had Woody and I working together, but we also built up a number of board members. And these board members and advisors were great for accountability. There was 3 of them. We would meet every quarter, and those folks would just hold us accountable to whatever we planned to do. And it just made things move a lot more quickly, because rather than doing things over months, you did things in weeks, and you wanted to because you wanted to show progress to them. So I think having people hold you accountable is key. And I think as well, it's important that these people aren't friends and family, because then you feel like you can kind of bend the rules. Like, I didn't do that thing this week, but that's okay because we were doing this wedding or whatever and it's fun. Whereas like when it's a third party, they don't really know or care about your life and all the little distractions, they don't really give a shit. And you also feel, I think, more accountable to them.
Yeah.
So all of our, advisors and board members were like literally just strangers to me. I didn't know them. I didn't know where they lived. I didn't know who they were. I just found them, reached out to them, and they committed. And I think that was great. So having accountability partners, or whatever you want to call it, is definitely useful to move things more quickly.
Amazing.
And then the other piece, I suppose, is just asking yourself and thinking about whether you've got the drive to actually get out of bed and do it every morning. And like I said, in the early days of all like the businesses I've worked in, it's tough when no one's telling you what to do. It sounds really stupid. Like it sounds like, oh my God, why would you not want to be told what to do? It's so nice, just like do whatever you want. But you can't like do whatever you want forever. Because no one's going to pay those bills. So it is really hard, and I think it's still freaking hard today. And I know what I'm doing at Willo mostly, but there's still like every day having to figure out, what do I do here? Like, because no one's going to tell you what to do. And obviously, when you get to like have a team like I do, you have to also think about, what do I tell them to do? Like what I need them to do to actually make things move forward. So like 12 people are asking me what to do, and I have to tell myself what to do as well. And that's definitely not for everyone. And I sometimes question it whether I want to even do this. Like it's really hard. So yeah, I think that's probably a good thing to think about, is do I even want to do that? Because it's definitely not like, obviously the grass is always greener. It's definitely not like super fun to just not have a boss all the time.
Yeah.
Because you have to
definitely,
be your own
it's
boss.
A big change.
And then you have like a million bosses anyway. Like all of our customers are obviously expecting stuff from us, and all of our investors as well are essentially customers expecting returns from us. So I've gone from like having one boss to having over 1,000 bosses, if you want to put it that way. And again, it's definitely not for everyone. I would question whether you want to do that before jumping in with 2P.
So last question is just one word to sum up your founder experience.
One word. It's a great question. I think passion would be my word. And I think passion probably, because if you don't have a passion for what you're doing, it'll be obvious to everyone else, but you also won't be able to go very far. I think you have to have passion, because passion, it also is nonsensical. Most of the time passions are nonsensical. And I think a lot of businesses and startups for founders are pretty nonsensical. Like there's way easier ways I could make money. Like you could just go and get like a normal job and probably get paid more and probably have like a lot less working hours and stuff. So it kind of doesn't make sense. But there is like an underlying passion to build some software that makes the world slightly better for candidates and employers. And that's the passion that kind of overrides and helps you do what you want to do. I think if you don't have that, or you try and pretend that or fake that, it's really obvious. And it also just won't give you the stamina and the longevity to keep doing it.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Euan, for coming on the Braw Tech Podcast. I really, really appreciate your time. And thank you so much to everyone for tuning in as well. We'll be back soon with more amazing founders. But thank you again, Euan. This was brilliant. I feel like I've learned tons today. So thank you so much. Please follow Euan on LinkedIn, follow Willo, buy Willo because it's amazing. And we will be in touch soon. Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning in for today's episode. This series is produced by Duke, and if you would like to find out more, please go to dukeagency.com.